Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Washington, D.C. Today for October's webinar on green competitiveness, we have my colleague Jonathan Coony here today. My name's Morten Zeya. I work in the innovation entrepreneurship team at the World Bank, together with Jonathan actually, who is the co-lead of the climate technology program and the global solutions co-lead of the promoting green competitiveness at the Trade and Competitiveness Global Practice in Washington, D.C. at the World Bank. He'll be speaking today on the topic of green competitiveness, and we look forward to hearing your feedback as well in the chat function during this webinar. Please use the chat function to ask any questions, and also feel free to use the Innovation Policy Platform Community of Practice discussion forum afterwards. If you have any questions, we'll be posting them there. I don't even want to talk too long. Let me introduce Jonathan briefly. He has 8 years of experience at the World Bank. Everything obviously very impressive. He's been working at the Energy Global Practice before coming to Trade and Competitiveness, and has worked before in the private sector. Most importantly, I think for this subject, he holds 2 patents in clean energy, if I'm right, and he launched a renewable energy startup before as well. He has 2 degrees from Brown University in mechanical engineering and an MBA from INSEAD in France. So without further ado, please, Jonathan, go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, Morten, and it's a pleasure to meet you all virtually. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Morten says, I'm going to talk a little bit today about green competitiveness and what that means to us, which is an assessment of climate change impacts that are taking place and that are going to affect the competitiveness of countries, of different sectors, and at the firm level, and talk about some programs that we have to try to help companies and countries enhance their competitiveness as a result of climate change and to mitigate any decrease in competitiveness vis-a-vis their partners or vis-a-vis other countries as a result of climate change. So I have this PowerPoint. It will go maybe around 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. Very much look forward to getting your responses on this. Very much look forward to getting your feedback on this, including please challenge me if you think what I'm saying is not appropriate. But let me just run through this quickly here for about the next 25 to 30 minutes. Okay.
1 second.
Let me go ahead and do that. Okay, let's start here with a couple of pictures. What are we talking about here? This issue is taking on a global reach and really even more urgency and more attention than it has before. We know that the Pope has weighed in with an encyclical earlier this year, continues to push climate change as an important issue, and that we should do something about it. Okay. Oh, there's Bill Gates. Different global public feature than the Pope. He's getting bigger and bigger on climate change, and has recently announced he's going to put $2 billion into new clean energy technology solutions. We also have Paris, lovely city. Later on this year in December, there's going to be the UN meeting there, and there's very high expectations, much, much higher than normal, that a deal will occur, and that deal will force further action on climate change. And finally, there's a picture of a nice island there, tropical island. The reality is that islands like that are in danger of being destroyed because of climate change. This is not something that is speculation anymore. We're seeing changes. People are having to react. It's a very, very serious matter that's getting increasing attention. Now that's the political side. That's the global side. What does it mean for people looking to determine how they're going to fit in competitively into a new landscape? Well, here's some numbers to throw at you, which are very large and hope to get your attention. The World Bank has estimated that between $70 billion and $100 billion annually will be needed for the next 35 years just to adapt to climate change. That's a report that we released as the World Bank last year. Those are huge sums of money no matter how you look at it. And let me give you the results of another study we did. This is something that we looked into on what we're calling clean technology markets just for developing countries. This includes a lot of renewable energy. This includes a lot of clean water supply, which is going to have to change because the weather patterns are changing. There's $6.4 trillion to be invested in these sectors over the next decade, just in developing countries, of which 1.6 trillion, but by our estimations, are accessible to small and medium enterprises in these developing countries. So this is not uniquely or exclusively a matter of large multinationals coming in and plopping down the technology. The participation of the local industry, including the SMEs, is going to be important, and it's going to be growing. Everyone is quite certain that that will increase. Okay, now is this... I thought I had something here on the animation, but not the end of the world. This slide shows a historical look at how difficult it is to project the growth of this sector. And what you're looking at is the cumulative installed capacity of solar-driven power generation. And if you look at the red line at the bottom, that was the initial assessment of the International Energy Agency back in 2006, and the growth is there, but it's quite modest. The next line up, the light blue line, shows what the EIA, or the U.S. government, projected in 2010. They say, okay, well, solar is heating up. That is to say, there's more and more growth, but still still nothing too spectacular. The next line, the green line, is IEA in 2010, where they significantly ramped up their projections of what will happen in solar. And the purple line is what Greenpeace said, noted environmental activist Greenpeace, what they said in 2010. And at the time, everyone said there's no way that we're going to see that kind of growth. That's Greenpeace. Those are crazy activists. They don't know what they're talking about. We know the serious numbers. We're serious people. And look what happened. That's the big blue line, which outstripped by far what Greenpeace had even projected in their wildest dreams. So it just goes to show the extent to which these sectors in climate technology, using the example of solar, are being disrupted, are being transformed, and as a result, we're seeing fantastic, fantastic growth. Let me talk a little more about solar. This is looking at the prices falling. The orange line there, prices have fallen, in the last 5 or 10 years. They're now a third. They're now 25% of what they were, and that's what you get when you disrupt an industry. Now, what are the applications of this for some of the clients that we work with? And remember, as the World Bank, our mandate is, one of the primary mandates is to address extreme poverty, and a lot of people do not have access to modern energy services. So as a result, they use off-grid, solar-driven technology solutions to provide them with electricity. Here you have a light bulb there connected with a PV electric generating system, and it used to be that the light bulb cost $1 to get enough photovoltaic cells or PV cells to light it was $420, and then that cost you $421, which some of us may not seem like a lot for lighting, but was well out of the reach of most of the customers who again, are off-grid and quite poor. Now what's happened, because the price of the PV cells has fallen so much, we're down at about $35, and also the amount of electricity that is needed for the light bulb has decreased because there's been a simultaneous advancement in light bulbs. We're going to LED lights from incandescent lights. So the startup cost of this is only $10, which is more than the $1, but the electricity it needs is so much less, and the fall in the price of the PV panels is so much that the overall cost to provide the same amount of electricity is now $45. That's the upfront capital cost. So look what's happened. We're seeing a drop in the upfront capital cost of almost 10 to 1, and this has happened over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's come from a combination of advancements that are taking place in clean tech, in this case solar, in this case renewable energy. So Imagine the disruption that happens when your primary product, serving a customer base, which is billions of people without access to electricity, but that we all realize need to get electricity. What happens when the price falls 10 to 1? Well, it creates a lot of exciting opportunities. Further opportunities are coming from different areas. Here's Elon Musk, South African, since relocated to the United States, and there's his company Tesla. In order for him to pursue the wealthy markets in North America, Europe, and Japan, he is building what he's calling a gigafactory for electric batteries out in the west coast of the United States. And then, so again, his market is to serve wealthy customers with high-end vehicles. But when he builds this gigafactory, the economies of scale there and the related technological advancements will allow battery technology to leapfrog where it is, and that has implications for our off-grid electricity users. To give you another example here of the big advancements taking place, this is M-Pesa. Some of you may know this, originally a Kenyan initiative, a Kenyan company to pay by mobile phone, make payments by mobile phone. People are taking that technology, combining it with the solar, and then you have a company called M-Kopa, which is paying remotely for the electricity coming from the off-grid solar technology that you have. So what you have is a lot of different advancements taking place. There's a lot of money going into the different technological strands. It's providing opportunities. It's providing transformation of these sectors. And I wanted to make the point here that the context of what I'm discussing is climate change, of course. How do we reduce emissions? How do we increase resilience to climate change? But many of the steps that we would advocate to do that with rolling out new technologies have profound co-benefits to normal development challenges. We've all seen this slide here where Africa looks like a big dark space there compared to North America, Europe, even India, which has had impressive gains on some electrification. As the new technologies are rolled out to be cleaner, they'll also address some of these development challenges, in this case by providing electricity to people that don't have it, which of course is a major, major impediment to any sort of sustainable development for the poor and impoverished. So just to sum up the context here before I get into some more specifics on how the World Bank and others are trying to foster innovation to take advantage of these opportunities, we have a growing and diverse political urgency on climate change. Not since the Copenhagen event, I think it was 2009, has there been such hope, and even more hope because the hope is a little bit more realistic that something will happen at the global level. Things are already happening politically at the domestic level. So things are going ahead there. Massive investments for developing countries here. When we do these kinds of estimates, we do acknowledge that, yes, they are estimates. No one will know what will happen in the future, but if history is any judge, those estimates on the potential for these markets may in fact be understated. There's a lot of growth here. And again, as I noted before, you have profound technological change. I've only cited the example of solar power and its applications for off-grid lighting. All of the research that's been done, all of the efforts to commercialize new technologies are now bearing fruit, so it's a very exciting time to get involved. So in this context, we are launching, or we have launched, within the World Bank, some activities under the theme of green competitiveness. I wanted to stress that this is not something that's just an internal World Bank effort, but something that we're keen to engage others on very much so as we develop this idea and as we develop the tools to make it happen. So what is green competitiveness? I've touched upon it a little bit, but green competitiveness roughly is looking at the ways that climate change will create opportunities to enhance competitiveness at the national, sector, and firm level, and to mitigate any threats to existing competitive positioning that any of the stakeholders may have. Climate change is viewed as a threat, and rightly so, and from an industrial competitiveness point of view, also rightly viewed as a threat. The way in which business is undertaken is pretty much going to be changed across the board. Supply chains, using natural resources, price volatility affected by climate change. What consumers need will be affected by climate change. So it is worthwhile to consider how your industry or your company could be threatened or undermined by climate change. But at the same time, there are a huge amount of opportunities here. That's sort of what I was talking about before. The investment will be big. There'll be a lot of private money, public and private money going into the climate change sectors, and they're seeing a lot of innovation. So our green competitiveness theme and group that we're growing seeks to gather stakeholders within the World Bank, but really more importantly, globally, to get thoughts on this and to refine this idea and come up with a set of tools based on experiences on what can be done to take advantage of these opportunities and to mitigate the threats. So let me talk a little bit more specifically about where some of these opportunities lie and where some of the threats lie. If we keep it at the level of climate technology sectors, as I've done, there's a strong narrative and story there, but we need to bring it down to specific sectors and subsectors to see what exactly can be done. So if you consider climate technology sectors, they can be broken down into two main categories, which I have on the slide here. Mitigation of climate change, that is to say reducing greenhouse gas emissions, primarily CO2, and then adaptation or resilience to a changing climate, which is already happening. So if you look at the mitigation side, some of the things that you would expect here, certainly renewable energy, which is solar, which itself is a range of different technology subgroups, photovoltaics, which I explained earlier. CSP is concentrating solar power, some very exciting developments in the Middle East on next generation CSP plants with massive investments there. SHW is solar hot water heaters, which is something that we've seen around the world in many places. Is there a way to accelerate that? We also have wind, of course. Biomass and biogas is a very real thing. Hydro is seeing a renaissance, and there's many others. Additional subsectors include energy efficiency, which itself includes industrial, commercial, and residential energy efficiency. There's tremendous low-hanging fruit here, so it's something the bank and others want to support. On the adaptation side, these are technology sectors that aren't quite as well known, or they're not quite as normally associated with climate change. I think the primary one is climate-smart agriculture. Agricultural production will be directly affected by climate change, of course. What is the way to join the existing efforts to improve agricultural production, agricultural efficiency, taking into account that the very nature in which it operates is changing? That's a very interesting area. Water supply, already a challenge for many of the World Bank client countries and the poor and impoverished within those countries. You know, it's only going to get worse. What can we do to put new technologies and business models out there to help them get the water they need? Information and warning systems and disaster preparedness and response. So if you look at this, you realize that, well, okay, we're going to have to do some sort of specialization on looking at the actual tools that will take place when you want to drive innovation or new markets in these sectors. But let's look first at some of the common traits that they all have. When a lot of people talk about exploding markets, rapidly expanding markets accompanied by technological change and disruption, they think about the ICT sector. They know what Google has done. They know what companies like Netscape have done, no longer around, but now we have Explorer and so forth. They know Facebook. They know all of that. That's a bit of an historical anomaly, the rapidity and the profundity with which changes occurred in the ICT sector. And the climate sectors are a little bit different, so we have to be careful transferring our expectations on change from the ICT sector, because let's see what happens in the climate sector. You have a lot of physical hardware. You don't have apps here. So that that makes the longer lead times for development. You need to test it in the lab, you need to go out and test it in the field, you need to test it in another field. It also means higher upfront capital cost and the need for a distribution network, which is a lot easier than people downloading your app from wherever you are, whether it's Silicon Valley or Bangalore. In these sectors, you're facing established incumbent technologies and players, often state-owned, not known for their ability or their willingness to change. So that can be an impediment. You also have the need to fit local circumstances. So if you're selling, for example, a cook stove, where there's a lot of potential there with new cook stoves, it has to be attuned to the local cuisine. They're very, very real stuff. On the positive side, some of the traits that all these climate sectors share is strong political support. If you go ahead and say, I'm developing a new renewable energy technologies, it's very easy to get a political player to back you. You also have strong customer appeal. Depending on where you are, people want to go green. So if you are offering a new product which has the same cost and performance profile as an existing product, but you're greener, that's a huge benefit, really, no matter where you are, maybe more so in the wealthy countries, but still. There's a lot of potential climate funding available, mostly for deployment of new technologies in these expanding markets, but also something for developments. And the other, I've mentioned the co-benefits, that not only are addressing climate change, but you're addressing long-standing economic challenges. So there is a common set of traits here. And I want to make the point again that this really is distinguished from the ICT sector, which can provide some lessons, but really is a very, very different sector. Let me talk quickly about some of the current programs we have at the World Bank Group to support some of the goals I've discussed under this green competitiveness. There's basically two existing programs. One is climate efficient industries, which you see at the left on that circle, and one is the climate technology program. So let me quickly give some description of these two programs within the World Bank. And this is just World Bank. There's a lot of other things taking place, of course. But here's climate efficient industries. This is looking at how industry in developing countries is being threatened by climate change. Maybe their business environment is changing to undermine their competitive positioning, and also being aware that industry is a major source of emissions. So as we want to mitigate emissions, we have to get industry on board. The Climate Efficient Industries Program works with industrial zones and industrial companies to bring best practice on resource efficiency, energy efficiency, the latest thinking on cleaner production to increase their profitability. This is not something that just has as goal the climate change aspects. The industrial sectors, the industrial players are asking for the services of our Climate Efficient Industries Program because we bring the best practice to them to increase profitability. Oh, just made a mistake here. Let me talk now about our Climate Technology Program, which is more for early stage innovation of climate technology solutions by developing countries for developing countries. There's a lot of change taking place, and we want to ensure that the innovation of new solutions, which puts together all these technology changes and makes solutions appropriate for local circumstances, is done by the local startups and entrepreneurs that know the conditions best, and that should benefit from the economic advantages of doing innovation. So we have developed a global network of climate innovation centers around the world. There will be 7 launched and established by the end of this calendar year, including Kenya, the Caribbean, South Africa, Morocco, Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Ghana, and we're in the process of developing some more. So these centers provide physical centers providing services to startups and entrepreneurs and other innovators that want to commercialize their new technologies, which would achieve economic benefits for the startup and the company, but also have profound climate change benefits and other co-benefits. I'll move along here. I'm happy to answer any questions on the CTP or Climate Technology Program in particular. So please let me know if there's more questions on that. But again, the bulk is to go and have the centers. Let me shift a bit to talk to the types of policies that can be enacted by different countries around the world, again targeting developing countries to support local innovation in these expanding and very exciting climate technology sectors. And I've broken it down into 6 categories. There's this slide, and I have one more slide. And I'll run through it fairly quickly. You all can read it, and we'll send you the presentation. But I wanted to make the point that some of these policies are things that you will have seen before and that would apply across sectors. Some of them, that is to say, are not specific to climate technology sectors in general or any of the specific subsectors I've mentioned earlier. That's okay. That's okay. We don't need to or want to reinvent the wheel here. There's some good tools out there for innovation. You'll also see that some of them do apply to the specifics of climate technology or the subsector within that. So that's worth to keep in mind. The first set of climate innovation policies are just basic technology development. And here's where fairly standard tools can be brought to bear. Certainly we would push sort of a applied R&D approach to complement basic lab R&D. There's got to be efforts to get those successful technologies out of the lab and into the marketplace. But that's fairly basic. And more is being done in this area. The R&D budgets for clean technologies have gone up in recent years, still have a long way to go, but that's already happening. The second place is entrepreneurship and business acceleration. That's where our climate technology program plays and where we think we can make a difference. You need to help people with good ideas who often are engineers, which is great. I'm an engineer myself, but taking that engineering acumen and providing it with the support to commercialize and make it a business. That's very important. The third place is crucial for, it's innovation finance here. It's crucial for all type of commercialization and innovation, but in this case I would argue that it's especially crucial for the climate technology sectors I've talked about. And that's because they are facing opposition from incumbent candidates. So that's because they do have a direct consumer interface where you need to get consumers comfortable with the new product that you're providing. And it's absolutely essential to get the money there that bridges the valley of death, to get the new businesses from a startup with a great idea to a functioning business. This is especially important in climate tech. A lot of people are looking into this. We are doing some stuff, in particular in Kenya. We have the Kenya Climate Venture Facility for early stage seed financing. This is something that needs to be addressed and it's very important. 3 more principles to note here on climate innovation policies. Market development. Since these sectors are in a way new and some of the solutions coming through are new, customers react by saying, no, I don't like it, it's new, except for the early adapters. There's a lot can be done to encourage consumers to take up these new products. Renewable energy credits and feed-in tariffs are very specific to clean tech, of course, but have had good success. It's sort of a mixed record, but they do get people to buy the products. The last point there is also important, consumer education campaigns, just to get people comfortable with these new technology solutions. The World Bank has a program, I'm not directly involved with it, but it's been very successful, Lighting Africa, where they build markets and get people comfortable with buying these new off-grid solar-driven lighting products. Legal and regulatory framework, some of these are standard with promoting innovation and commercialization. Some of them are specific to the climate technologies. The important one here is carbon pricing or cap and trade, or you can look at it from a negative point of view and say, okay, we're going to put in some carbon taxes. That can really make a difference. And finally, the last point here on international connections. The example that I cited earlier with the profound and rapid transformations taking place in the solar industry is really an example of how you need to interact. A lot of the developments, the technology developments in PV systems came from the OECD countries, primarily the United States, The rapid decrease in prices came from China when they jumped in and really put their manufacturing might on it. I mentioned pay-as-you-go. That's M-Pesa. Originally it was M-Pesa, an idea that originated in East Africa, and is now being applied by entrepreneurs with local knowledge all over the world. So innovators, inventors type people tend to be a little bit nose down in the lab, sort of brilliant scientists. Making those international connections to facilitate such synergies, sort of serendipitous synergies, is really important in this sector to support innovation. So I'm going to close now. Really looking forward to your comments, and please challenge me or cite your own example. Really looking forward to that. But just to close by saying, okay, there's two objectives here. Climate objectives. There's an imperative that we do something here, and people are increasingly doing something, and they're not talking about it anymore. We have to address climate change. But let's do it in a way that also drives economic objectives. An energy-efficient motor in a factory reduces emissions. It also makes it more efficient. This is huge growing markets with jobs. Jobs is everything nowadays. People are struggling economically. Countries are. You talk about jobs, you talk about investments. So the question is, in our mind, how can stakeholders position themselves to take advantage of the new opportunities, and then also worry about the challenges that they are facing. Now, one final slide here. I wanted to alert you all to an event that we are holding here at the World Bank in conjunction with our climate change colleagues and energy colleagues, and also done in partnership with the World Resources Institute, WRI, and the Finnish innovation agency, Sitra, to get people together, industrials, academic, government officials from around the world, and debate this idea, some of the ideas I'm talking about here, whether the analysis is correct at a theoretical level, which we're feeling pretty strong about, but then what do you do about it? What kind of actions can be taken to respond to the opportunities that are being presented and the threats to certain industries? So we will have all of your email addresses, people that have logged on here. I see there's quite a few, and we will. You're more than welcome to come or send. We'll put you on the list for announcements that we send. Again, that's November 19th here in Washington, D.C. For those of you who can't make it, it will also be live streamed, so do stay tuned for that. And finally, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I look forward to your thoughts and your questions.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. That was actually a great overview of green competitiveness. As you said, it's a new subject. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot of components coming into this, and I'm looking forward to everyone's questions. We already have one question coming in from Gansho, who asked between the connection between straight procurement to favor cleaner energy solution and the public procurement of innovations. What is the connection? How can you conceptualize it? What do we need to think about in this sense?
The question is on how procurement can be...
So the question is how the connection is between state procurement in general to favor cleaner energy solutions and public procurement of innovations in general.
Okay.
So they're very specific.
Well, it's a really good question. Government is a big customer. Mm-hmm. We know that. Governments also tend to be risk averse. We know that as well. So they tend to procure based on what they can measure. And what they can measure is the lowest cost. So they want to procure for certain services, say to build a new building. And someone will come and say, I've got the most efficient building around. It's going to cost 10% more than what this other guy's offering. He's got the cheapest building around. So governments will often go for the cheapest because it's easy to justify. That's something that needs to be revisited, and I know a lot of people are looking into a cleaner public procurement. And then when you talk about procuring innovation, government also has work to do because they tend to be risk averse. So you come in and you say, okay, well, I have this new approach, take the example still of the building, a new energy efficiency technology which will improve the environmental performance of the building. It's been tried 2 or 3 places with good results, and someone else comes in and says, I've got the same thing that we've been doing for dozens of years. The risk of innovation is a real deterrent for procurement. by public entities at any level, really. So I think a lot of people are looking into it. It's not an easy one to solve, and I would say even at the World Bank, we act in many ways like a government, being a large institution which has a large bureaucracy, and trying to push new procurement policies that would in turn push or lead to more progressive procurements. It's a challenge, but it's an important point to consider.
Okay, thank you. Question I actually have, because I've been working on the CAC in Pakistan myself, and you talk about the customer appeal and the consumer education campaign. I feel this is especially in South Asia a big deal. And please correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but can you give other examples besides delighting Africa, how to actually get consumers educated, what should be done, what are the pros in this, what are the obstacles doing consumer education?
Well, it's a good point and a very important aspect of these when you talk about retailing new cleaner technologies. If you ask, again, going to the example of Elon Musk, he does not need government support to get consumers excited about his products, right? He doesn't really do any advertising. He's positioned himself so well that these products within this market, within the consumer segment that he's looking at, they love it. So green is good, new is good, innovative is good, high tech is good. But you go to some markets like you mentioned South Asia, Africa. I mentioned the Lighting Africa example, where all of those things are bad. Give me that's kind of good, but I've been doing a diesel generator to provide me with electricity for the last dozen years or so, and I'm going to stick with that. In which case, the government does have a role to play here. I cannot off the top of my head cite another example of this widespread consumer education beyond the Lighting Africa, but I know that at the country level, governments are doing just that. And it really can make a difference. In a way, it's quite reasonable. This is a new thing. It's something that you're being asked to purchase. It's something that is not extraneous or frivolous. You're talking about your electricity or your lighting or your water. Best to be safe. That's what people think, and it's perfectly understandable. Government going in and demonstrating the benefits of these technologies can go a long way to growing that particular sector and the local industries within those sectors as consumers become more comfortable.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Hatem who asked if we shouldn't start testing these approaches in developed economies first before moving this to developing countries. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, very interesting point. A lot of people are saying just that and have been for some time. I think that we need to let's test and develop it everywhere. The paradigm you're suggesting, if I understand correctly, is more of a traditional tech transfer paradigm where it's true. Technologies are developed in the industrialized countries, tested in the industrialized countries, and then transferred to the developing countries. That has had some successes. There's no question. Now I think we need to move to more of a distributed innovation approach. Because the problem with the tech transfer paradigm, the traditional one that I've just described, is that the technologies or technology solutions, when they arrive in those developing countries, from the developed countries, they may not fit into the local circumstances. So then you adapt it a bit, but it's never quite that successful. Another problem is that the benefits of developing these new technologies, the economic benefits, the financial benefits, stay with the OECD. That's not right. That's not fair. That is not likely to lead to buy-in to these new technologies at the developing country level. And you also miss out a tremendous amount of innovation potential in terms of talent and even some of the institutions which could be built up in developing countries, but there's still some good stuff there. So I really want to push to a distributed innovation approach. You would never want to say, okay, well, we're not going to bother to test it in the OECD countries. Let's test it in Africa and see if it works. I mean, that just doesn't really happen that much in sort of the stark way that I'm talking about. So I'm all for distributed innovation. Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. I again encourage you to please post your questions. We have received a few questions in advance of this, so just to let you know, we do see them as well. So talking about how can green competitiveness...
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah.
I see that Hatem has pushed me further, and I asked to be pushed, and I want to address his question there. And he writes, for those of you who can't see, developing countries have far more challenges with providing basic needs of their citizens than worrying about climate change. I couldn't agree more. We cannot put the responsibility for dealing with climate change on the backs of developing countries, especially the poor within those countries. It's not fair, and politically it's a non-starter. What we're trying to argue is forget about climate change. Forget about the effects of climate change. It's possible to have the best economic development objectives, the best way to provide, how to put it, the basic needs of their citizens with these new technologies. Take a hold of the new technology developed in the OECD and use it for your own purposes, for development objectives, to make money, to create jobs. Take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of climate money out there to reduce emissions and so forth. Use that to make your economic benefits, to meet your economic development objectives. We would never say what you're suggesting, and I agree completely with your basic point there.
Okay, perfect. So we'll see Hatem's writing, so we'll see the comment afterwards, I guess. And just move back a little bit. You touched upon the regulations already with standards and special economic zones in a bit, but how can green competitiveness be achieved through strict and innovative and environmental regulations? Can you maybe delve in deeper a little more in that? What innovative regulations could be there to support green competitiveness?
Yeah, well, this goes back to one of the categories of policies that I talked about, and there are specific actions that can be done by governments to support this innovation. I mentioned the procurement; that's a bit of a special thing. Mm-hmm. The carbon pricing is emerging as the primary vehicle by which governments can influence the market to drive innovation. If you know when you're developing a product that the fact that it is cleaner will give you a financial advantage through carbon pricing over the incumbent dirtier technology or another dirtier technology that's also being developed, that will motivate you to do that innovation rather than just counting on the fact that, well, it's cleaner, maybe some people will like it. Now, carbon pricing is a whole subject into itself. You can do it through, in effect, taxation or cap and trade. You could do some kind of incentives per unit per ton of CO2 mitigated, and that gets very complicated. But being clear on that, being clear on having a value for carbon is really important. Another thing is targeted commercialization support for clean tech sectors. The government can say, well, I do see that this is a sector that we want to get into for the various reasons I've cited, and political reasons, maybe it's cook stoves, maybe it's biogas, maybe it's wind or sustainable agriculture. I'm going to set a carbon price. That's a carrot for people to go after developers. But we all know that it's tough to innovate products. So you need earlier stage intervention. So you could have sort of a competition, a public-private competition for something coming out of the lab in the sector that you're targeting. You could have some of the acceleration work that we do in our climate innovation centers around the world. So carbon pricing is the big one to drive people into the market with new products, but then you do need earlier stage support as well to help them get over that valley of death.
And can you talk about the earlier stage support a little bit, or is that something, a topic of its own as well? Or?
Well, no. Some of the things that I've talked about, and here I think the best way to look at it is to start as a basis the innovation chain in any technology. We know that starts in the lab, then you get applied R&D, and then you get the early adapters and so forth. And then you would have to say, okay, well, based on that, and that's a fairly established paradigm, established set of tools, how can it be tailored to the specific sectors that we're talking about, because climate sectors are different than the others, and then within climate, you also have subsectors, as I've talked about, and then the local circumstances. Because when I use the phrase developing countries, and everyone does, it should be more or less clear that categorization breaks down pretty quickly and pretty profoundly when you compare. Are we including China in that? Okay, but then you're also including Chad. I mean, there's no real commonality between those two countries. But then you have to go down to the country level and see what's best.
All right. So Mark from Brazil is asking about examples of green low carbon zones in developing countries. Do you have any of those?
That's a good question. I'm not myself working that closely with zones. It's more my colleagues who are based in Istanbul, in Turkey. I know that the concept of the green zones is gaining attention. I know that there's at least one in China that we've reviewed. I don't know if you could follow up separately, get your contact, and I can put you in touch with those people, or send you some research we've done on that, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm just speaking off the top of my head.
Okay, perfect. No, that's absolutely fair. And yeah, Gancho has asked this question earlier already. What about CICs in Southeastern Europe? Is there any intention of the World Bank to work on that, or is there demand questioning? Is it worth looking into? Maybe you can comment on that a little bit.
When we started the CIC model, we started in Kenya and India. The one in India didn't work out. That's the way things go. Because there was sort of an opportunity there, and there was the development went very well. There was great interest in it, so now we're expanding, as I've shown. You may have seen on the map, there's nothing in Southeast Europe. There's nothing currently in the FSU, or the former Soviet Union. This is something we would like to remedy. There's a number of factors that go into where we try to put CICs. But looking at Southeast Europe, former Soviet Union, former Eastern Bloc, there's a lot of potential there, because there's a high level of technology sophistication. There's a high level of financial market sophistication. But there's also massive, massive needs, because even 25 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, the efficiencies, the energy and environmental efficiencies of many of the processes there could still benefit from advancement. It's not the clean techest place around. So where we put the CICs is a function of that kind of global analysis, but it also has to correspond with the realities on the ground. So stay tuned there. We don't have one yet.
Okay, good. So one question we also received earlier, and I guess it's again a very broad question, but maybe you can walk us through a little bit. So how do we green the industry, and how do we green, especially the question was the electronics industry? What should be steps to be taken by the government and the private sector to move forward in that?
Well, I'm again going to say that this, my colleagues who are working in Istanbul are the experts on going into the industries and then greening them. I do know that they're seeing a lot of demand for their services, and I can't speak, I'm afraid, specifically on the electronics sector itself. I'm just not an expert in that specific sector. I do know that across the board and across sectors, the combination of new technologies that are more efficient, that can go into industrial processes, combined with this anxiety about, oh my God, we have to get cleaner because the weather is changing. We have to be more climate smart and climate aware, and we have to get cleaner because there's going to be new standards in place. The customers are going to demand it. So this combination of pressure to go cleaner, combined with the fact it's never been more easy to go green with these new technology developments, is creating a lot of interest, and we're only a small player in trying to help, whether it's electronics or other sectors, become more green.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So another question coming in, generally from the World Bank, actually. So from the consumer homeowner point of view, is there only new solar technology which is more sustainable, or what are the other options for homeowners to use to get energy?
Okay, good question. I did cite the solar one because it's probably the best example. Others, are you talking about homeowners? I mean, there's a wide diversity of homeowners, and I'll assume we're talking about, the extreme poor, those less than living on less than $1.25 a day, perhaps in rural conditions, perhaps not attached to modern energy and water services. So the solar is a big deal. It's not only solar lighting, but solar for all of the electricity needs, and combined with batteries. I mentioned the developments we're seeing in batteries. So you have solar all the time, and usually batteries traditionally have not been very cost effective. You're also seeing mini grids forming. So it's not just you and your household, and it's not you attached to the national grid. It's you and your village or your town. So anywhere between 10 to 100 families can come together and take care of their needs together, which has economies of scale. Cook stoves has long been a consumer product with both environmental implications and development implications and financial implications for the consumers. I haven't seen the latest, greatest on cook stove. This is something people have been addressing for a long time. It's really a challenge. But we are seeing a lot of developments is in biogas, and this is something that can be based on local activity. In Kenya, we're supporting a company working at a slaughterhouse, which has a lot of waste, which normally they use as waste. We're helping them bottle the biogas that is produced by this waste so that they're not only serving their local needs there, that is, say, the needs of the slaughterhouse, but then can transport that to other consumers and spread their distribution chains. On the water side, I'm not such an expert in water technologies. I do know that as in the renewable energy space, there's a lot of innovation that's bubbling up now, both at centralized water provision and also what they call point of use, so a filter that can be used by an individual to purify brackish water. And there's a lot of developments in more of those distributed approaches to providing clean services.
Okay, I guess we have one more final question we'll take from Diego. Latin American countries sometimes have competitiveness difficulties in the development of traditional industries. Isn't it even more difficult for the new innovative sectors, which rely even more on research, on patents from the developed countries, and have more financial risks?
Well, in some ways, yes. I think to answer the question, you have to look at the specifics of each sectors and then maybe break down those sectors. If you're talking about who's going to develop the next generation of more advanced gas-fired power plants, and that's a cleaner technology. It's going to be Japan, Germany, the U.S. That's where the technological sophistication lies. And probably that's not going to change. China is always a special case, but if you look at some of the other sectors or subsectors, I would disagree with your point because most of the growth, for a number of reasons, most of the growth that's going to take place in these climate technology sectors will be in the developing countries. You talk about energy supply. That's a huge climate thing. I don't know the numbers, but there's a much greater percentage of growth in energy supply, electricity and other energy sources will be in developing countries. So they need to get involved. A lot of this stuff will be consumer facing, where it's not a question of the greatest technology coming out of a lab. Oh my God, we have it, and everyone's going to take it. That's just not the reality. The innovations are going to take place in combining those technologies that come out of the lab into a product that works with an innovative business model, because that's where a lot of the innovation takes place, and that should be in the developing countries where the consumer demand is and where it will continue to be. So you're right, but I mean, ultimately, I'm not agreeing with you because I think a lot of the innovation is going to be on the business model side. There's always the question of IP. I haven't found that to be, when you're looking at specific applications on the ground, to be a major impediment. I'm sure you can cite examples of when it is. One last thing. The developing countries, and this is getting a little bit tricky for me because I'm grouping developing countries together, which I said we wouldn't do, but there is this notion of leapfrogging that the existing infrastructure in the OECD countries will prevent putting in these new technologies. So therefore, it's better to introduce the technologies in the developing countries, which as a theory makes a lot of sense. You really have to look at the specifics on how that works. But that would further boost the prospects for local companies to get involved on innovating the next generation of solutions. And it's not even the technology solution, but it's an overall business solution.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. This was a fantastic overview of the subject. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. So I want to point out that we will have a little survey afterwards, so we'll appreciate the next window. We'll show you a survey. Please fill that out. Furthermore, we've received all the questions. We'll post them on the IPP Community of Practice discussion forum. We invite you to join the IPP COP and join the discussion afterwards. There'll be a recording available as well, so if you want to share this with people that are interested, stay in touch with us as well. And next month we'll talk about innovative entrepreneurship. So a whole host of program on entrepreneurship at the World Bank going on next month, and the IPP will also host a webinar on that. Thank you again, Jonathan. Thank you again all for joining us all over the world this month.